name's Corey. I work for Dr. Ann. I'm an aquatic ecologist. So I will be uh, running the club today, and we're going to be talking about sea lampreys and the Great Lakes. So just kind of
Mhm.
what they are, um, kind of how they interact with other things in the lakes, and then some follow-up. So have you heard of a sea lamprey before?
They're one of the invasive species.
Yep, that's right. And they're a type of fish, and they're really old. They're actually one of the oldest fish, right? Because if you look at this, right, it doesn't look like a normal fish, right? It kind of looks super old, right? It doesn't look like a goldfish, for example, right?
Yeah.
So, um, and you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but you can see the mouth, which is a picture on the bottom, has
Mm-hmm.
all these crazy looking teeth, right? So,
Yeah.
and a lot of times with fish, we can kind of tell what they like to eat or what they do based on the mouth part, right? So, based on this, like, what do you think that they do, or what are they trying to eat?
I think I remember when I was like somewhere in like third grade or so, we did this invasive species project. And I wasn't doing like the sea lamprey, but I know one of my friends were. And they told me that a sea lamprey eats fish, like big fish, and uh, some other like big fishes, I remember.
Yep, they're actually sea lamprey when they're adults. They're actually parasitic, so they'll latch on to the fish like a lake trout in the lake. So yeah, that's exactly right. And you can kind of tell by the mouth, right? There, it's really small, and they have a lot of little teeth, so they're really good at attaching onto a surface, and they're going to be like sucking essentially on the blood of other fish. So they're pretty
Yeah.
gnarly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and we kind of mentioned this, right? But so how they live and the life cycle of them, right? So as adults, they are parasitic, but they're not always parasitic in the environment, right? They when they actually when they spawn, and how most fish will actually reproduce, right, is they'll actually lay eggs, right? So what they'll do, and sea lamprey actually are called anadromous, which just means that they live in both um, the ocean or a large body of water, and then they'll spawn into a stream. So they kind of have like two lives going on, right? So they'll first start out, they'll essentially swim up the stream and they'll spawn, and then the little larvae will actually live in the stream for like 3 to 10 years, and then they'll actually emerge out of the stream and become adults again, and then they'll complete the life cycle. So the whole time, they really don't spend a lot of time in lakes, right? They're only going to be in a lake for like a year, right? So they really spend a lot of time underground eating little things before they actually will go after big fish. So I want to show a quick video of what they actually look like when they spawn, because I think it's really cool. So let me see if I can play this. So this is actually in Massachusetts is where this video is taken. So they naturally occur in the ocean, but they've made it to the Great Lakes as well, and they'll come into streams to spawn. So this is a couple minutes, but I'll go through and kind of explain what's going on here. So that's a sea lamprey, right? And this is a freshwater stream. So what they'll do is they'll come up into these streams looking for a place that it's looking to spawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's normally a bunch of them. Like if you see, you can see all of them, right? And what they're actually trying to do is they're trying to make a little bed, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to pick an area that they like, and they're going to start trying to move around rocks to be like the protective area of where they're actually looking to spawn. So I'm not sure if we're going to see it here, but if you look closely, you might see them start trying to pick up rocks. Yes,
Oh yeah, I can see this one.
yeah,
She was picking up a rock.
yep, because they they don't have arms, right? So they're pretty much stuck on just trying to use their mouths to move stuff around. So they're going to try to
Why
make
do
a
they
nice.
try to pick up the rocks?
What's that?
Why do they try to pick up the rocks?
To
So
make a bed.
Yep.
Right.
So they're trying to make a little bed for all of their eggs when they actually reproduce, and they do this because they're trying to protect the area where they're going to lay those eggs to try to protect from other predators, and it's just a evolutionary thing. So you can see them. That's a pretty big rock, right, in the stream that they're trying to move. And
Yeah.
then what they'll do is they'll hold on and actually and reproduce. So as I said, after this, it takes them they'll spend several years in these streams before they actually emerge. A lot of other fish will will spawn a lot faster and they'll become adults a lot faster. But the lampreys, though, they'll hang out for a long time. So that's
Current
a
kind of looks like really strong.
yeah, they can get really big if and I'll show you a picture based on a trout how big they are. But yeah, these things can get um, over like a foot or two long. So these are pretty big. They're not like little goldfish, right?
Yeah.
I used
So
to own goldfish.
yeah, they didn't look like this, did they?
No.
Well, I can't really remember. I was 5.
Oh, shit. So and you can see if you see these little holes on the side of them.
Yeah.
That's actually where they breathe. So a lot of fish, like your goldfish, actually have gills on both sides of them that they'll open and close to pass the water, so they inside them so they can breathe. But with lampreys, they're so old that they just have holes that the water actually that goes into. So it's really cool. They're super old, like I said. So anybody have any questions about that? I know I went through that a little quick, but I just wanted to show you a quick video of what they actually do. Okay, so um, I just want to talk a little bit about how they actually interact in the environment, right? We mentioned that they're parasites. They eventually make it to where they feed on fish. So, and that's a type of what's called symbiosis. And I know it's a big word, but really all it means is just how life interacts together, right? Sim
Okay.
is together, bio is life. And there's a lot of examples in nature of this, right? You see like a clownfish and an anemone, like in Finding Nemo, right? Where he's always by the anemone, and that's a mutual interaction, right? They're both organisms are benefiting, and you can also have cases where they'll interact, but only one organism benefits. That's called commensalism. That's on the bottom, where you have like a bird hitching a ride on a buffalo, and the reason that it's doing that is because it's waiting for the insects to be attracted to the buffalo, and then the bird will actually eat that, eat all the bugs. It doesn't have to go anywhere. All it has to do is ride along and wait for food to come to it, right? So um, and the buffalo isn't negatively impacted, right? It just has a bird sitting on it. So that's an example of one organism benefiting and another not. But with lampreys, they actually harm the organism that they're attaching to. And this is an example of a lake trout, and this is what happens in the Great Lakes. So what the lampreys will do is they'll attach themselves to a fish like you're seeing on the right, and then it'll actually suck out the blood of it, and actually will kill the fish, which is obviously not good for the fish, right? But it's good for the
Yeah.
lamprey. And they can actually eat or they'll essentially kill like 40 pounds of fish just with one lamprey, which is a lot, right? So that's a lot of fish.
And so like this is why like this like the fishes that live in the Great Lakes, their population is going down because of the sea lampreys, right?
Yep, that's one impact, and they used to be even worse than they are now. But yeah, and lake trout are really important to the Great Lakes, right? They-
Yes.
They're important ecologically. They're also people like to fish for them too, right?
Yeah.
So it benefits all the communities around the lakes that need the lake trout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a question, Alyssa. What's up? What's up?
I was just wondering what the black things on the fish are on the right.
So those are actually the lamprey. So
Oh,
yeah, so that's what they look like, and these are a little small, but those are the actual sea lamprey. So they'll actually attach on to a host fish, in this case a trout, and actually and feed off of it. So that's what those black things are.
I can see like one bite over there, like in the middle of the fish, I think.
Yep, yeah, they'll essentially detach. So sometimes a fish doesn't die with just one on it, and they'll leave these big circle mark. So yeah, right by that right hand, you can see a little hole, and that used to be where another lamprey was attached to the fish. So
Is there another lamprey going into its gills, or is it just?
yep, yep. There's actually two on this fish. There's one up at the top, and then there's one right by the gill. Yeah, so a lot of times you can have multiple sea lamprey attached to one fish, and that's not good for the fish, right?
Nope.
Nope. So that's how they kind of interact with other organisms in their environment. And I mentioned that they're in the name, they're sea lamprey, right? So
Mhm.
so based on that name, where do you think they normally live?
See.
Yep. Yeah. So and we keep talking about how they're in the Great Lakes. So how did they get here, right? Because the Great Lakes, while they're really big, they're not the ocean, right? they they might
Wait.
look like a sea.
So, um, wait. I think so. Didn't you like say early on that they traveled by little streams, and then that leaded into the Great Lakes?
Well, so how they reproduce is they'll go into streams to spawn, and then go back, and then the young will go back into the ocean to live as adults.
Mm-hmm.
In the Great Lakes, right? The ocean's really far away from here, right?
Yeah.
So it would take a fish it would have to travel a really long distance for it to make it to where we're at. So that's kind of where we're going to go and what we're going to talk about. So based on this map, just to orient, what part of it are we at right here in St. Joe? What lake are we on? People know.
Lake Michigan.
Yep. Yeah. So we're down here in the corner, right? So, and if we zoom out, right, we can see all the Great Lakes, and now we can actually see the ocean, right? So how an organism would have to come through here is it would have to swim from the ocean on the right through that really narrow stream that's called the St. Lawrence River, have to
Mm-hmm.
go the whole way into Lake Ontario, which is the lowest one, and then it would have to go into Lake Erie, into Huron, and then to Michigan. So that trip is almost 2,000 miles, right? Yeah, so it's really unlikely for it'd be really hard for a single fish to make it that far, right? And before about 200 years ago, it has a lot of obstacles in the way. Does anybody know
Oh, Niagara Falls.
Yep, yep. So this is between Ontario and New York. And do you think a fish would really want to swim over this?
No.
Nope. Right? Yeah. So this is what's called a natural barrier. So these prevent a lot of organisms that we might not want in certain areas to make it to other. And there are natural barriers in little streams, right? There can be a bunch of rocks, or there might be an area where you don't have water throughout the year, and that can stop organisms from traveling through a stream. But here, in this case, it is a very large waterfall, right? So for thousands of years, lampreys were never able to make it to where we're at in Lake Michigan, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think changed over the last couple hundred years that humans may have allowed this to happen?
Mm, wait, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so before they would have had to try to make it over a waterfall to make it to where we're at, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think that humans may have potentially assisted the lamprey to actually get to Lake Michigan? Like, do you think there were any changes that may have happened?
Be like maybe let's see, like maybe sometimes if there was like a blockage, because like there's a lot of towns by like the stream, so maybe like when there's blockage over there, maybe people would like take out the rocks or something to make sure that the stream keeps flowing, and maybe that would help the sea lampreys to get through, because
Yeah,
yeah,
that's really close. So instead of like moving rocks, what people tried to do is they tried to widen areas and then go around things like the Niagara Falls, right? So they're trying to make alternative areas, right? And in that same location, Niagara Falls, they built canals.
oh yeah.
Yep, and this is called the Welland Canal. This is one of the first big ones, right? And it connected Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. So, and why do you think people wanted to build canals like this?
so that ships and boats can pass through. I remember learning this in third grade.
Nice. Yeah. So
How like
it's
the water rises,
yep.
and some
Yes.
sea lamprey would pass through who traveled.
Yep. And they can also you can potentially get them attached to the ship or even in the ballast water. But yeah, but by connecting them, it allowed them to swim through these canals. And
Mm-hmm.
the main reason people want to do this, right, is because they wanted to trade and they wanted to just and get goods from one place to another, right? Because
Yeah.
these ships are ocean ships, right? They're really big. They're not going to go up a little river. And people in like Minnesota wanted the goods on these ships. So a couple hundred years ago, they built canals like this to connect all the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they got in, right? And if we let's see if this will play once they get in, it's really hard, they can spread really fast. So all these little dots are occurrences of sea lamprey, and you can see this is going to take about 150 years, but in that time period, they pretty much made it everywhere. So
Whoa,
this is
that is a lot of sea lamprey.
yep, and that's just let's go back. I want to sorry, I'm gonna try to I want to show you that one more time. I'm gonna try to slow it down. Oh, this isn't going to work. Okay, but you can see so right here is 1940, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't take very long, right? So we keep going. This is 1980, so a little bit before my time, but right now is about when I was born. So between now and or between then and now, right? They are all over the place. So it doesn't take very long, right?
Wow.
Yep. So um and with that, right? Those ships also bring other things, right? So when you connect one area to another, you open up a whole host of other problems, potential problems in the environment, right? And
Yeah.
these ships, what they how they actually are able to balance on the water, they use ballast water, so they bring in water into the ship, right, from the
Yeah.
ocean. And there's a lot of other things that ride along on those ships. And we already talked about sea lampreys that made it into canals, but we have things like zebra mussels and quagga mussels in the Great Lakes, which is a zebra mussels picture on the right there, right? And then we also have what are called spiny water fleas, that also um, tagged along on those ships too. So by just building a couple canals, we opened up to a whole host of problems on a lake like Lake Michigan. So it's an unintended consequence, right? We wanted to do one thing, which was to move goods that people wanted to buy from one area to another, and we brought along a bunch of things we didn't want, right?
Wait, so how like would the sea lamprey like just like how it would suck on fishes? Would it just suck on like the side of the boat, or would it just travel along while the boat was doing
So
its
most likely it just traveled in the water.
okay?
Like zebra mussels are so small that they'll actually attach onto a ship, or they'll be in the ballast water because they're
Mm-hmm.
they're tiny, right? Same with the water fleas, but the lampreys most likely came through the canals, and then it took a really long time for them to have a big enough population to where they can go from one lake to another. But yeah, they most likely traveled naturally through the canals themselves. So um, that's a that's kind of the slides that I had. Did anybody have any questions about lampreys or invasive species at all, like or things about the Great Lakes?
How many invasive species are there? Because
Just in the Great Lakes?
yeah, just in the Great Lakes.
I don't know a specific number, but there are quite a few. There's a lot of plant species that made it through. There are you have little like small organisms like spiny water fleas, a couple different kinds of mussels. So we have the quagga and the zebra mussels,
Mm-hmm.
and then the lampreys and a couple other invasive fish.
I
So
remember there was like silver something. I forgot what type of fish it was, but I remember there was that and sea lamprey.
yep. And then in some areas, they're trying to keep them out. or in some of the streams you have like round gobies, which people actually use as bait to fish with, and those made it to areas too. And what people are really trying to avoid are Asian carp, which are the ones that jump in the water. I don't know if you've ever seen a video of those, but yeah, that's what people are really trying to keep out of the Great Lakes. If in Chicago, they actually took a stream, the main river that goes into Lake Michigan, and they essentially electrified it to make a barrier so the fish can't make it from where they're at to the lake itself.
I think what they need to do is find something that maybe can like eat sea lamprey, and that so that the population can balance.
Yeah, and there are a couple ways that people have tried to control for them. So a lot of times they try to target where they actually spawn. So remember I said that they live in the stream for like 3 to 10 years. So
Mhm.
that people have developed essentially a chemical. It's a lampricide that they can release into a stream and actually try to kill the larval uh, lamprey, or they'll try to set up traps because
Mhm.
these lampreys try to like go into a stream at pretty predictable times of the year, and they'll try to catch them while they're going into the streams to try to stop that life cycle, right?
Yeah.
If you break up one of those sections of life cycle, you win, right? It's really hard to get these once they're actually in the lakes when they're adults, but it's much easier to try to control for them when they're little. But some countries will eat them. In a few in Europe, where they're really common, some countries will actually eat lamprey, so people actually will eat them. But it's hard to convince people around here to eat lamprey, right? They don't look very appetizing, do they?
Especially with the teeth.
Yeah, they are kind of scary looking, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, so I know I kind of went through that a little quick, and does anybody else have any other questions?
Mm, I don't think so.
How about you, Alyssa? Do you have anything?
Nope.
And one thing that I wanted to let me go back real quick. I wanted to bounce back to a slide. Let's see where I want to. Yeah. So, and I kind of mentioned it about when people target to try to and stop these lamprey from coming in, and I mentioned that they like to spawn in a pretty predictable period, and it's kind of like salmon, like how salmon will go back into like where they were actually born,
Mhm.
to reproduce, and then the adults will actually die after they spawn. So the adults don't ever make it back, but what people are trying to do is to catch the adults before they actually spawn. So in that time period when they're trying to enter these streams to when they spawn is when people are trying to catch them, essentially,
Okay.
because after they spawn they die.
Okay.
But alrighty, well, that was, oh, I don't want to play that again. That was pretty much all I had. I know we went through that a little quick, but um, thank you for I'll move back. So thanks for joining. This is my first time holding one of these upstream clubs, so I think Dr. Ann will be back next time. So I guess with that, thank you for joining. And if you don't have any other questions, I guess we'll end it here.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, thanks. Take care.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for joining.